2 a.m., February 14th, 1945, northern Luzon. Sergeant Red Miller sat in the exposed bucket seat of an M16 Half-Track, positioned at the center of a shallow defensive perimeter. Behind him, a muddy supply road. 2 miles back, an artillery battery and a field hospital. If this perimeter broke, the road opened. If the road opened, the guns went silent. And if the guns went silent, the entire push into the mountains stalled. This wasn't just a patch of jungle, it was the hinge of the sector. The infantry of the 25th Division were dug in around him in a rough horseshoe formation. Foxholes, sandbags, trip flares, claymore substitutes wired from scrap. They weren't defending ground, they were defending continuity, and sitting 10 feet above them in plain view was a machine they didn't want there. The M16 multiple-gun motor carriage. 12 tons, truck wheels in front, tank tracks in back, impossible to conceal, impossible to ignore. The men called it the Dragon Wagon, not with affection, with frustration. It was built to shoot airplanes. There were no airplanes. The manual said it was an anti-aircraft asset. The captain said it was a mortar magnet. Logistics said it burned ammunition faster than an entire rifle platoon. And in jungle fighting, ammunition was survival. Miller didn't argue with them. He understood the problem. The infantry's .30 caliber machine guns could hold a line for a while. But human wave assaults didn't come for a while. They came all at once. The reports said a full Japanese battalion was assembling in the ravine east of the perimeter. If they broke through this clearing, they would be inside the wire in under 30 seconds. And here was the part the manuals never addressed. A water-cooled machine gun overheats. A rifle jams. A barrel glows. A quad mount does not slow down. 4 M2 .50 caliber machine guns, electrically powered traverse, full depression to the ground, and 2,000 rounds per minute if you held the switch down. The infantry saw a liability. Miller saw something else. He saw a weapon that could create a wall. Not suppress, not delay. A wall. The jungle ahead of him shifted. Metal scraped stone. The enemy wasn't probing. They were forming. The perimeter was about to be tested. And the only thing in the clearing tall enough to see over the grass was the Dragon Wagon. The infantry believed the M16 was misplaced. Miller believed it was misused. The M45 quad mount mounted behind him had been engineered to destroy aircraft diving at hundreds of miles per hour. Its 4 .50 caliber guns were factory harmonized to converge at roughly 600 yards, creating a shared cone of fire designed to rip through thin aluminum wings. On paper, it was a precision anti-aircraft instrument. In the Luzon jungle, 600 yards might as well have been 6 miles. Combat here happened at 50 yards, sometimes less. If Miller left the guns in factory alignment, their streams of fire would run nearly parallel at close range. Deadly, yes, but too wide. A charging formation could slip through the center gap before the barrels could correct. So earlier that afternoon, while officers debated sending him back to the rear, Miller took a wrench to the mounting brackets. He loosened the clamps holding each M2 in place and dragged empty ammunition crates 200 yards out into the clearing. He painted a white cross on the center crate, climbed back into the turret, and adjusted each barrel inward by hand. He forced them slightly cross-eyed until the bores intersected at that mark. He created a ground convergence zone. At 200 yards, all 4 streams of .50 caliber fire would smash into a space the size of a kitchen table. It wasn't air defense anymore. It was compression. It was area denial. Then he rebuilt the ammunition belts. Standard anti-aircraft loadouts used balanced mixes of ball, tracer, and armor-piercing rounds. Efficient, economical, predictable. Miller stripped them apart and relinked them manually. He increased the tracer ratio to 1:3 so he could track every stream in total darkness. More importantly, he prioritized armor-piercing incendiary rounds.
API ammunition was meant to punch through aircraft engine blocks and ignite fuel tanks. In jungle fighting, it punched through logs, bamboo, and dirt berms. Where a 30 caliber round chewed wood, a 50 API round erased it. The infantry saw a loud truck. Miller had quietly turned it into a powered wall saw. By midnight, the rain returned. By 1:30 a.m., the jungle noise shifted from patrol movement to assembly. Metal struck stone, equipment scraped through mud. The battalion wasn't scouting anymore, it was forming for impact. Miller started the auxiliary generator and felt the turret come alive beneath his hands. The infantry winced at the noise. He welcomed it. Full depression was -10 degrees. He could rake the ground itself. If the Japanese came in a human wave, and intelligence said they would, the riflemen would fire as fast as muscle allowed. The quad mount would fire as fast as electricity allowed. That was the difference. He rested his thumbs on the butterfly triggers and waited for the moment when rifles would no longer be enough.
The first contact did not come as a charge. It came as a test. At 1:57 a.m., a single muzzle flash blinked from the tree line, then another. A Japanese Type 92 heavy machine gun opened up from behind a bamboo thicket, its rounds snapping overhead and stitching the mud between American foxholes. It was reconnaissance by fire, a calculated attempt to force the perimeter to reveal its strongest positions. The riflemen responded instinctively, sending 30 caliber rounds back toward the flicker in the dark, but the enemy gun was dug in behind logs and packed earth. The American bullets chewed leaves and splintered bamboo, yet the hostile fire did not stop. It walked closer. The platoon flattened into the mud as the enemy gunner calmly adjusted his aim. The infantry captain shouted for mortars, but in the rain and darkness there was no clear line for correction. The perimeter was pinned. The Japanese gunners had achieved what they wanted: silence from the American line. Silence meant vulnerability. Silence meant the main assault could assemble without resistance. Miller did not ask for permission. He kicked the traverse motor into motion and felt the electric hum surge beneath him. The turret swung left in one smooth, mechanical sweep. Through the reflex sight, the glowing ring floated over the jungle's black mass. He centered it on the blinking muzzle flash. He did not tap the triggers, he locked both thumbs down. All 4 M2s erupted simultaneously. The sound was not a burst, it was a sustained, tearing roar that vibrated through the half-track chassis and rolled outward across the clearing. Tracers streaked forward in 4 converging streams, meeting exactly where Miller had set them that afternoon. At 200 yards, the bamboo thicket ceased to exist. The armor-piercing incendiary rounds smashed through logs, through dirt, through the bunker's protective facade. Sparks flashed as the incendiary compound ignited inside the wood. In less than 3 seconds, roughly 150 50 caliber rounds struck an area no larger than a kitchen table. The Japanese machine gun stopped mid-burst. The muzzle flash vanished. The bamboo collapsed into splinters and smoke. Where there had been a fortified firing point seconds earlier, there was now only a shredded depression in the earth. Silence followed, heavy, stunned, unnatural. The infantrymen slowly lifted their heads. They stared at the smoking gap in the tree line, then back at the half-track behind them. No one laughed now. The captain who had threatened to shoot Miller said nothing. He simply looked at the jungle and understood what had just happened. The quad mount had done in 3 seconds what rifles and mortars could not do in 3 minutes. It had not suppressed the bunker, it had erased it. And in the darkness beyond that ruined thicket, the Japanese commander understood something as well. The Americans had brought a weapon that did not trade bullets, it deleted positions. The whistle that followed was not retreat, it was escalation. The whistle cut through the rain like a blade. Then the jungle moved. Not wind, not shadow, men. They poured out in a dense formation, rifles leveled, bayonets fixed, officers shouting and waving swords. 80 yards of open ground lay between jungle and foxhole. In mud and darkness, that was still less than 15 seconds. The riflemen fired. Garands cracked. The 30 calibers hammered. The first rank fell. The second stepped over them. The third did not slow.
At 50 yards, the wave was still coming. At 40 yards, the grenades were gone. At 30 yards, the machine gun barrels were glowing. This was the moment human wave doctrine was built for, when metal overheats and men get tired. Then the air behind the line tore open. Miller drove the barrels level with the center of the charge and held the triggers down. The quad mount roared. At this range, the four streams hadn't fully merged. They were separate lanes of fire, cutting a wide corridor through the front of the assault. The men in the first rank didn't fall cleanly. They hit something unseen and stopped. Bodies collided. Momentum collapsed into confusion. Miller swept the turret left in a tight electric arc. The tracers carved a glowing scar across the width of the formation. Where the fire passed, movement ended. The flanking group trying to hook the right foxholes was forced flat into the mud. The chant broke. The rhythm shattered. A second cluster tried to push through the ravine on the left. The turret snapped around and dipped low. Short bursts, violent and precise. The depression became a trap. Ricochets multiplied the damage. The rush died in the gully before it reached the crest. Then came the brighter flash, a mountain gun. The shell detonated near the half-track, rocking the chassis and spraying mud across the shield. Miller had already seen the muzzle bloom. He turned the turret toward it and held for 5 long seconds. The jungle there tore apart. Sparks flashed. Then a deeper explosion rolled through the trees. The gun went quiet. Mortars tried to adjust. They didn't finish. Each flash in the tree line was answered with a sweeping burst that flattened crews before they could correct their aim. The assault that had begun as a solid wall was now broken into fragments, clusters crawling, men dragging wounded, officers screaming for regrouping. Miller did not slow. He kept the convergence zone alive. The charge kept moving. The ground in front of the half-track did not.
The charge did not stop when the first ranks were cut down. It compressed. The men behind kept pushing forward, stepping over bodies, slipping in mud, screaming through smoke and splintered bamboo. At 40 yards, they were still coming. At 30 yards, the foxholes began to shake from the weight of impact. The infantry's rifles cracked and clattered, but the rhythm was too slow. Barrels were overheating. Clips were ejecting into mud. Grenades were gone. The wave kept moving. Then the quad mount answered again. Miller didn't shout. He didn't warn. He simply pressed the butterfly triggers and held them. The 4 heavy barrels erupted in one continuous tearing roar. The recoil never reached him. The mount swallowed it whole. Tracers stitched bright red lines through the smoke, converging just beyond the truck, exactly where he had set them hours earlier. The front of the charge didn't collapse, it flattened. Bodies folded mid-stride. Momentum died in place. The space in front of the half-track stopped moving. He swung the turret left in a tight electric arc. Not forced, not wrestled, the powered traverse motor carried the weight effortlessly. The glowing stream shifted with it, cutting through a cluster trying to flank along the tree line. Bamboo snapped and toppled. Figures dropped and did not rise. A mountain gun flashed from deeper in the jungle, a yellow bloom, then thunder. The shell struck close enough to rock the chassis and shower him with mud. Miller did not measure distance. He did not calculate angles. He turned toward the flash and held the triggers down. The converging stream smashed into the muzzle flare. Logs shattered. A second explosion followed, ammunition cooking off. The mountain gun fell silent. Mortars began walking toward him. Dirt geysers crept closer. He lowered the barrels slightly and raked the suspected pits. The ground erupted under the weight of tungsten cores and incendiary sparks. Camouflage nets ignited. Movement ceased. The second wave never fully formed. It hesitated at the ravine. Miller saw the mass gathering and snapped the turret around toward the depression. He elevated just enough and fired in controlled bursts, letting tracers guide him. The rounds plunged into the hollow and ricocheted among rock and root.
The screaming changed. It lost its edge. What had been a war cry became confusion. The barrels were glowing now, dull red through the smoke. He shortened his bursts, 1 second, 2, enough to deny space, enough to keep the ground in front of him empty. The turret floor filled with brass until it was ankle-deep, shells cascading from the ejection ports in a steady metallic rain. 2 infantrymen climbed the side of the half-track without being told. They swapped ammunition chests under fire, slammed fresh belts into place, and dropped back into their holes. No one called it a target magnet anymore. The charge tried once more, smaller, fractured, desperate. It never crossed the convergence line. Wherever the guns pointed, the open ground held. The men in the foxholes stopped firing altogether. They watched the red arcs sweep back and forth and understood that adding their rifle shots only wasted ammunition. The quad mount had become the center of gravity. By the time the eastern horizon began to pale, nothing organized remained beyond the tree line. Smoke hung low. Branches burned in scattered pockets. Miller kept the turret moving in slow arcs, scanning, denying any last flicker of movement. He fired only when something shifted. The screaming had stopped. The whistles were silent. Only the ticking of cooling metal and the faint crackle of brush remained. As dawn pushed through the mist, it revealed no line forming for another rush, no officers raising swords, no mass assembling in shadow, just churned earth, splintered trunks, and open ground that no one had crossed. The jungle was quiet again, and the road behind the half-track was still American. Dawn didn't arrive gently. It peeled the darkness back like a bandage. The jungle in front of the half-track was no longer jungle. 50 yards of trees had been cut down to broken stumps and splintered trunks. Bamboo lay shredded flat against the mud. Smoke drifted low over churned earth where the charge had ended. The convergence zone was visible now, not theoretical, not mathematical, visible. The infantry climbed out of their foxholes slowly. No cheering, no speeches, just quiet inspection of ground that had almost taken them. The bodies stopped exactly where the tracers had crossed, not 10 yards closer, not 1 step beyond. Sergeant Red Miller sat in the bucket seat, hands still locked around the spade grips. The barrels ticked as they cooled. The floor of the turret was buried in brass up to his boots. The generator idled low, steady, obedient. The captain climbed up beside him. Yesterday he had called it a liability, a target magnet, a mistake. He looked at the open ground, then at the half-track, then at the road behind it. He didn't apologize. He didn't need to. "Keep it right there," he said quietly, because that was the lesson. The Japanese charge had come with numbers, with noise, with belief. It had crossed 80 yards of mud, and then it had met 4 converging streams of steel. The charge kept moving. The ground in front of the half-track did not. When the sun finished rising, there was no formation left to reform, no second wave building, no whistle, just open ground that had refused to be crossed. The jungle would grow back, the trees would return, but that road behind the half-track did not change hands, and it never did.